Another really annoying thing about historical reconstruction is that it's very hard to drape on a regular dress form. The stays and corsets change your body shape, but they cannot really change the shape of the dress form because, well, it's the dress form, so it's not as flexible as a human body. A lot of people choose to buy a dress form that is one size smaller and then pad it up to the correct silhouette, or buy an adjustable form which tends to break apart quite easily. However, in my case, I'm just about the right size of the smallest dress form available, so neither options really worked for me. And so I decided maybe it's time for me to make my own custom-made dress form. I bought a customized pattern from this website called Bootstrap Fashion, whose link I shall share below. It offers quite a variety of patterns of different styles and sizes. I went with the last one here. Once you click open the page, you can fill in your measurement accordingly and you have the option to do it in centimeters or inches. Thanks for being so international. If you have any questions about any of the measurement, click the question mark and you will get instruction on how to take the measurement. At the bottom, choose whether you want to include seam allowance in the pattern and whether you want the output to be in PDF or AutoCAD file. You will also be able to select the paper size you use to print out the pattern. About 20 minutes later, you will receive a package from the website which includes a cute little avatar of your customized dress form, a PDF pattern of about 20 to 30 pages, a how to print instruction, and a very detailed sewing instruction. I printed out the patterns to its actual size and trimmed down some of the borders. I then taped them together following the dashed line and cut out all the pattern pieces. In terms of fabric choices, you will need 3 kinds of fabrics. The outer fashion fabric is a medium weight woven non-stretch fabric. I just went with the leftover muslin from my previous project. Underneath the muslin is a layer of fusible interfacing for reinforcement. For the inner support, you will need a fabric that is rigid and heavyweight but not too thick. I went with a piece of starched linen. You probably can't really see this clearly in the video, but my interfacing is adhesive on one side, so I ironed it down to the muslin first. I then folded the fabric in half and traced out the pattern pieces. Don't forget to transfer all the notches. This might seem like a redundant step here, but trust me, it will make your life so much easier once you start sewing. I forgot to include seam allowance in my pattern, so here I'm just adding half an inch of seam allowance all around. Repeat the same steps on the starched linen and cut out the armholes and inner support. Some extra support is needed around the armhole and base, so I took apart an Amazon box and cut these pieces out. Once you have all the pieces ready, you can then start assembling. First, pin and stitch the center back pieces to the side back pieces. Because the dress form needs to be extremely sturdy to survive all the stuffing and pinning, I adjusted the stitch lengths to about 2 mm. All of these cut pieces are curved along the edge, so I had to clip into the seam every 3 to 4 cm in order for the seam allowance to lay flat once pressed open. Next, stitch side cups to center cups, lower side fronts to lower center fronts, and assemble them along the cup seams. After pressing the seam open, I top stitched over the cup seam with a red zigzag stitch. This marks out the outline of the cups and also serves as reinforcement. Then stitch the upper side fronts to the upper center fronts and close up all the seams except for the center back. I used a tracing wheel to transfer the bust, waist, and hip lines while copying the pattern, and I top stitched over with a zigzag stitch. If you are not a big fan of marking your dress form like this, you can just skip this step. Then stay stitch the seam allowance of the neck and armholes with the longest stitch lengths of your sewing machine and sew the shoulders together. Clip into the neck seam every 2 cm so that it's easier to machine stitch the neck piece. Be careful not to accidentally cut into the stay stitch. Pin the neck piece to the neckline and sew them together. Now close the center back seam and remember to match all the notches and zigzag lines. At this point, I've finished pretty much the major parts of the dress form cover, and so I moved on to putting together the top, bottom, and armholes. First, the neck top. Stay stitch along the seam allowance and clip into the seam like before. I first basted together the neck top and neck piece by hand, but if you are proficient enough at machine sewing, then by all means skip this basting part. Repeat the same steps and attach the armhole covers to the main body. Then baste the stabilizer to the covers . Insert the cardboard cut out halfway through and stitch them together. Next comes the inner support. Among the 3 sets of cut pieces, the center piece, stitched along the side seam, would become the pipe sleeve. The front and back pieces would connect with the center front and center back of the dress form so that it doesn't warp while being stuffed. First, stitch the pipe sleeve, and then assemble the inner support together. To further reinforce the fabric, I stay stitched over the front and back pieces with a couple random vertical lines. Fold the dress form cover along the front and back center seam, lay it down as flat as possible, and pin the inner support to the cover. Make sure that both pieces have open flat seam facing each other while being pinned, instead of having all 4 seams facing the same direction. You could see that there's some extra fabric left unsewn at the bottom of the pipe sleeve. I forgot to take video of this part, but you basically have to cut it into a few strips. They will come into use later. Stitch the inner support to the cover and clip into the curves. Once the inner support is finished, I cut out the neck filling from a sponge. The neck is about 7.5 cm high. The sponge I bought was not thick enough, so I had to glue 2 pieces together. Turn the dress form cover right side out, push the sponge inside, and adjust it to the right position. Now comes the last part of stitching. First, sew along the straight sides of the front and back base covers respectively. The seam allowance of the semicircle in the middle needs to be clipped quite a few times to lay flat once pressed open. Place the zippers under the straight edges, baste by hand, and machine stitch them together. Once all 4 sides are in, trim off the extras and stitch the base to the cover. And finally, the cover is ready for stuffing. According to the instruction, depending on your size, you will need 5 to 10 pounds or 2.5 to 4.5 kilograms of fiberfill or batting. I put a little bit of the batting in and inserted the tube into the pipe sleeve. Ideally, the tube should be the same length as the dress form itself. However, I found this tube randomly in the trash and didn't have the proper tool to trim it, so here we are. I also did not stuff it as firmly because I wanted to leave some space inside so that the shape could be more easily altered by corsets. Once you get to a stopping point, check the measurement of the dress form and see if more stuffing is needed. Finally, insert the cardboard base support into the cover and pull out the pipe sleeve fringes through the center hole. You could use the 2 oval holes on the sides to stuff more batting in if needed. Glue the fringes onto the cardboard to keep the pipe sleeve in place, and the dress form is complete. I put my dress form on a stand that was kindly given to me by a friend, but the coat rack or any variation of a pole on a tripod stand would work perfectly. You could also put a C-clamp on the stand to make the height adjustable. This dress form only cost me $40 in total, which is really cheap compared to a professional form which easily costs over $300. So if you are hesitant about purchasing an extremely overpriced dress form, it's probably not a bad idea to make one for yourself. I hope this video is helpful, and please hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed watching.